In episode 3 in our mini series on the Christian story, we come to the man from Ur, a man named Abraham, way to the east of Israel, from what's now known as Iraq, what was then known as Babylon. This promise, this episode, what happens here is the grand central station of all of God's promises. Everything that happens from here on out flows from episode 3. God's focus narrows from all of humanity, Adam and Eve and Seth and all of humanity, through what happened after the flood with Noah and his family. Now we're narrowing down to focusing on one man and his family. All of humanity is narrowed down to one man named Abram and his offspring. And this man and his offspring will be a conduit for God to rescue this world from itself. These people, Abraham's offspring, will love God, and these people, these new people he's choosing, will be a forward operating base of sorts to spread the message of allegiance and loyalty and love to God while they wait for the rest of the episodes to unfold. But first, we need to ask ourselves, if Abraham's children are the ones who are going to do all this, Abraham's children are the ones through whom the promise is narrowed onto and focused onto, who are Abraham's children? The Bible story shows us that first God defines the genealogical route this blessing will take, narrowed from Abraham to one of his sons named Isaac, and to one of Isaac's sons named Jacob, and from there to his 12 sons, who are the originators of the 12 tribes of Israel. But then, shortly afterward, once we get to the book of Exodus, God makes explicit something that was already happening. And that is that being a son of Abraham, being a child of Abraham, being a member of God's family is about heart, is about love, is about allegiance to him from the heart. And it's not about genetics. Membership in God's family is ideological. It's about allegiance. It's not about biology. It's not about who your parents were. Israel, even later in our story, in episode 4 at the Exodus, was less an ethnic, homogeneous ethnic people group and more of an ideological group of people from all over who are united in their love for the one true God and his promises to the world. In Exodus chapter 12, verse 38, we're told that the Israelites left Egypt, but then tons of other people who were not Israelites joined the family and left Egypt with them. A bunch of them were probably slaves and other lower ranking folks on the social ladder from Cush, which is modern day Ethiopia. Moses' first wife, named Zipporah, was the daughter of a pagan Midianite priest. She's not an ethnic Israelite. Moses' second wife, whom he marries later after his first wife apparently passes away, is a black woman from Cush, again, that nation south of Egypt and around modern day Ethiopia. Moses' grandson, Moses' grandson Phineas, who plays a huge part as we go into the story of God's people when they get into the promised land. His name suggests that he is also a black man from Cush. Rahab, who shelters the Israelite spies as they're scouting out the promised land, as they're about ready to cross over the Jordan River. Rahab becomes a believer and joins the community, just like Moses' first wife, just like Moses' second wife. Ruth from Moab, a pagan nation, joins God's community and becomes one of God's adopted daughters. And she is an ancestor of Jesus from a human perspective. So that this Abraham through Isaac to Jacob and onward pipeline was less about who's saved and who's not, who's a member of God's family and who's not a member of God's family. And it's more about God choosing or marking out a cadre of ambassadors to represent him to the world, so that anyone who wants to can join the family. Being a member of God's family has never been about ethnicity or genetics. It's been about those who believe are part of God's family. That's who a real child of Abraham is, whether you're an Israelite, a Jewish person, or whether you're not. If you believe in Jesus and the promise of his coming, then you're a child of Abraham. And in Genesis chapter 12, we have this promise to this man from Ur who God picked out of nowhere, who Joshua chapter 24 says didn't even know God or believe in God or love him. God picks him out of nowhere just because he can, and he gives him some promises. He does the same thing in at least three other places in the book of Genesis, but we're going to stick in Genesis 12, verses 1 through 3 and verse 7. I'm not going to read the verses, but I'll talk about what they say, and you can check them out for yourself. God makes many promises to Abraham, and the promises he makes, we're going to see fulfilled later. So I'm going to give you a preview of how they're fulfilled, and we'll talk more about it as we go on to further episodes in this story. He tells Abraham that to go to a land that he's going to give them that's going to be theirs forever. And that land is called the Promised Land. And as we look further down the story, to the end of the story, to episode 8, we see that the Promised Land is this new and better creation that God promises everyone who loves him, where things that went so wrong in the beginning are going to be made right, where we can reboot and worship God in spirit and in truth, in a new heavens and a new earth. He says he's going to make a great nation from Abraham, a community that can love God and love one another. Those are Abraham's children, whether you're a Jewish person or whether you're not. But if you love God and his promise of Jesus, you can be part of this community to come. That's what God's doing now. He's gathering a community through the message of the gospel. He told Abraham that he would bless them and give them divine favor. He blessed Abraham and his family he's going to have and shower favor on them like it was supposed to be in the very beginning with our first parents, Adam and Eve. He told Abraham that he was going to make Abraham's name great, and that his people, Abraham's family, would bless many people all over the world. That talks about how Abraham and his children are a conduit or a channel or vehicles for telling the story of Jesus to the whole world so they can join the family too. He said that he would protect them with his divine favor. The people who blessed Abraham and his family would be blessed. Those who persecuted Abraham's family would be cursed. God protects his people because he's given us a mission to carry out, and we need to be around so we can carry it out. And then finally, most preciously, he said that through Abraham and his family, all the people of the world, all the people of the earth would be blessed through Abraham. And how has that happened? As Abraham's children spread the gospel, the good news about God and this community and this promised land to come to the world, and invite people to join the family so they can experience it too, he blesses the world by the people who go and tell them about this news, this message. The Apostle Paul in Romans chapter 4 and Galatians chapter 3 talks about this a lot, and we'll talk about it more as further episodes in the story. So who is the ultimate son of Abraham, the ultimate child of Abraham, who will be the channel or the vehicle par excellence to fulfill all these things that Abraham's children are supposed to do? In Matthew chapter 1, when Matthew lists who Jesus from a human perspective is descended from, he says he's descended from Abraham. He calls him the son of Abraham, the ultimate child of Abraham, the one person in whom all of the promises are wrapped up in and fulfilled in. And Jesus' mission, the Apostle Paul said, he said this to a Roman governor as he's standing trial in Caesarea a long time later, that his mission, Jesus' mission, is exactly what Moses and all the prophets said, that we're going to talk about in later episodes, that Jesus suffered and died, that he was the first to rise from the dead to new life, and then bring the message of light to his own people and to the Gentiles. So this one promise, these katina of promises made to Abraham and all his children, now that we know who his children are, this simple promise, special promise made to this simple man from Ur, is the fountainhead for all of God's promises through the rest of the Christian story, and especially through his ultimate descendant, Jesus of Nazareth. And as we go on through episodes 4 and 5 and 6 and onward through the story, we'll see how this special, precious promise to this man from Ur unfolds and lays the groundwork for the rest of the story to come.